So the full cut list for ST-12, the next starter deck coming our way, is finally out. Now we don't have the exact number of copies of cards per deck, but we can kind of make a guess based on other starter decks that have been released. And this starter deck in particular is going to be focusing on a leader that has two characters on it. Mainly it's Sanji and Zoro. Best duo, best combo out there. And it's a really powerful green-blue leader that actually has a bunch of super rares that are useful either in this deck or in other archetypes, which we'll talk about in a bit. So sit back, relax, and let's go through every single card coming to ST-12, the Zoro and Sanji leader deck. So the full deck was actually shown during the presentation on the One Piece Card Game official channel. You can take a look at how the box looks like. It doesn't really look the same as the others where it's kind of like a manga. This is slightly wider, so we'll make a comparison once we get the product in our hands itself, but it looks great. Sanji, Zoro on the cover, that's awesome. Now let's get into the card list itself. So here you can see the full card list of the deck itself, but we don't really have exact numbers of how many copies of each per deck, but we can kind of make a guess once we go through every single card. And yeah, let's just get into the first card itself, which is the leader. So first of all is Zoro and Sanji. This is the first time two characters have been on a leader card, so I think it's going to be a norm moving forward, maybe in future sets, which is really cool to see. So it's green and blue, 5000 power with 4 life, so it's kind of generic in that way, but it does have two different attribute types, slash and strike. So if this leader attacks into the 1 cost buggy, because it does have the slash attribute, I believe that it still won't be KO'd. It doesn't kind of like, oh, because it has strike, you can KO. I think it just applies that it does have two attributes in one leader card, so that's something to take note of in the future as well. So the ability is easy. Don 1 when attacking once per turn. You may return one of your cost 2 or higher characters to its owner's hand, then set up to one of your power 7000 or less characters as active. Great card ability, because you are essentially, you can attack with something that's 7000 power, a character, and then you attack with your leader. You return something else that you can potentially have in your hand, like a 2k counter with a really powerful effect, and then you can set that 7000 power character back to active and attack again. So it's like multiple attacks, you're re-standing something to attack again. I believe that this is going to be one of the new powerhouses once it's officially out. Not sure if it's going to be like straight S or A tier, but a definitely solid, powerful B, maybe even high A depending on the list, type of leader that we can expect to see in the next metagame. I'm really excited for this leader. I think the effect has a lot of potential because of some of the cards in this deck and maybe cards that have existed or will exist, and the ability to restand one of your characters is just really powerful. So the next card we're going to talk about is Kuina. 3 cost 2000 power with a slasher attribute with counter 1000. Activate main, you may rest this character, rest up to one of your opponent's characters cost 4 or lower characters. The trigger ability is to play this card. So utility wise, this is the kind of card you want to be returning back to your hand with Zoro and Sanji's ability, because you can activate main, rest this character, and then rest one of your opponent's characters, and then you don't want this to be attacked by your opponent's characters or leader, so you return it back to your hands where it's safe, and then next turn you can play it out again, rest it again, rest something else. So yeah, this is kind of what the deck is trying to do, and Kuina is a really good example of that. And there'll be more cards which we'll talk about, especially this next one, which is none other than Dracule Mihawk. So this Mihawk is the super rare of the deck. Oh, I forgot to mention, Kuina probably, maybe even if it's not 2 copies, then it's a full 4. But for Dracule Mihawk, it's probably going to be 2 copies only, based on what they've been doing for the past 12 starter decks or 11 starter decks. So Mihawk is a super rare, 3 cost 4000 power with counter 2000. So it's really cool because it has the 7 Walls of the Sea archetype, and it also has the Shikaru Kingdom archetype. So I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. On play, if you have 2 or less characters, play up to 1 4 cost or lower Shigeru Kingdom type or slash trait character other than Dracule Mihawk from your hand vested. And this is one of those cards that are like super utility, because you can bring out a 4 cost 6000 power Zoro that has the slash trait character type, which we'll talk about later on. There's one in the deck as well, and then return it with your leader's ability, and then you have Mihawk in your hand as a 2k counter. Really powerful stuff. So people have been talking about a combo wombo with this card and the film Brook from Opio 2, and it's actually really quite amazing. Okay, so here's the scenario, and I will show you guys a clip from a Japanese YouTuber that actually did this on one of their gameplay videos. I will post a link to that game in the description below so you can just see how crazy it is. So this is the clip itself. I'll post a link to the gameplay in the description below, but you can see it's the Green Uta versus Enel. I know I'm kind of segmenting a little bit, but here you go. So first of all, he has the Trafalgar Law, film Trafalgar Law on the field. He uses the ability to return it back to hand, and then he plays out Dracule Mihawk. And then on play ability, you can play out 4-cost Slash, you play out Brook. And then Brook's ability, you play out Nico Robin. Nico Robin's ability, you play out Law. And then you return Law back to your hand, you play out Nami. You pay 1, you get to search. And then, okay, whatever card you search as a film, okay, he searched the 2K Chopper. And then you can still put a Dawn onto Uta and attack. Get another card in your hand. What an insane turn with just Dracule Mihawk in addition to that. Uta is going to be crazy. But yeah, sorry to segment. We are talking about the list, but I just wanted to show that moment because it was kind of crazy. But now we move on to the other cards in this deck. So essentially there are 4 vanillas in this deck. I'm going to put all of them on screen. So your 3-cost 5000 power vanilla is the Human Drill, that just standard vanilla with 1k counter. Your 4-cost 6000 vanilla goes to Perona with really nice artwork, but unfortunately just a vanilla. Then your 2-cost 4000 power vanilla goes to Paddy and Karn. And the last one, which is your 1-cost 3000 vanilla, is Bluefin Elephant Tuna, which is kind of linked to Sanji because Sanji does cook elephant tuna in the anime manga, even in the live action. So I don't know, that seems a little bit disrespectful to include this card because Sanji cooked him. But anyway, yeah, these are your vanillas you can expect to see 4 of in this deck. You can use them if you want to, but now let's move on to the cards with actual effects. Next, we got Yosaku and Johnny. It's a green character, 2-cost 3000 power with counter 1000. Don 1 when attacking, choose up to one of the following effects. Rest up to one of your opponent's cost 2 or lower characters, or KO up to one of your opponent's cost 2 or lower rested characters. So this way you can attack with Johnny and Yosaku, and then you return this card back to your hand with your leader's ability. You could, I mean, it's a very niche. It's you need 2 Dawns to make it like 5,000 power to attack to your opposing leader, provided it's a 5,000 power leader. So yeah, not that great. You can probably replace this with other options, but it's a start. Next up, we got Rika, 2-cost 0 power with counter 2000. On play, you may pay 2 Dawn. If your opponent has 3 or more lives, set up to one of your slash trait character with a cost of 4 or less as active. Now this is actually quite decent. It's a 2k counter, so immediately you can have like a full 4 off in the deck. And at the later half of the game, you can technically just like have a 4-cost Zoro on the field and then just put a bunch of Dawns on it. Maybe you leave 4 Dawn for playing Rika and paying 2, and then you can essentially, that's what, 6 Dawns onto a 6000 powered Zoro. That's 12k. That's like 2 attacks with 12k. Late game wise, that's pretty good. As long as your opponent doesn't have blockers, not a lot of cards in hand, that's a good win right there. That's a Eustace Kid level win. So decent effect. Also has potential to work with the leader's ability to return them back to your hand if you want to for multiple attacks. So there you go. Next, we got Zoro himself, 4-cost 6000 power, and his ability is Dawn 1 when attacking. Rest up to one of your opponent's cost 6 or lower characters. So it's a really great ability, especially when you are restanding cards with your leader's ability. You can potentially rest like 2 of your opponent's cost 6 or lower characters, which could be really good on a turn that you want to really go for a game, or you can rest 1 character and then the next attack into that character. So that's actually really quite good. Really like the Zoro. And the next card we're going to talk about is none other than another super rare, which is Ivankov. So Ivankov is your super rare, probably going to get 2 copies of this. 3-cost 4000 power, and so Ivankov's ability is on play, reveal the top card of your deck, play up to 1 2-cost character card, then return the remaining card to the top or bottom of your deck. So you can kind of filter out your draws that way. To if you don't like what you see, you just put it back to the bottom. Then when attacking once per turn, if your hand has 6 or less cards, draw a card. Really great second effect. Just the ability to draw a card on attack. You don't even need put Dawns, but you should because it's only 4000 power. But that's a way to refill your hand in the early or late game as long as you have 6 or less cards in your hand. And then it's sort of like flooding the board a bit so that you can fuel your leader's ability, so that you can have other targets. Like you can play out an Ivankov, and then you can play out a Rika, and then use your leader's ability to bounce Rika back to your hand. So I believe that's how this card is meant to be used, and with the additional trait of getting you card draw with the secondary effect. Good super rare, I think. And yeah, good to see Ivankov back. Alright, next one is a Sanji character card, 2 cost 3000 power with a striker attribute. Don 1, when attacking, if you have 5 or less cards in your hand, this character gains plus 2000 power to the start of your next turn. Quite a decent common card, I would say, because you can, well, I mean, you can return it with your leader's ability if you want to, but as long as you have 5 or less cards and you put 1 Don in it, it's already a 6000 power beater, which is really quite powerful. And knowing how this deck works, maybe you will have less than 5 cards. So yeah, for Sanji, it is until the start of your next turn, so there is a little bit of inbuilt protection that way. Not sure how many copies will be in this starter deck, but I want to see people kind of mess around with this. I think Sanji would be an interesting card to see in the early game. So next up is Charlotte Pudding, 2 cost 2000 power with counter 2000, and its ability is activate main, return this character to the owner's hand. So you can, you can play it out with Ivankov's ability or some other ability that we're going to talk about, or like you just need fodder for your leaders to bounce something back. But if you don't have that, then you can always return it back to your hand where it's safe and you have a 2k counter. There will be ways that this card will be good. I'm just saying. Well, I just don't see the full picture yet, so there you go. Next up, we got Zeph, 5 cost 5000 power with counter 1000, and on play, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and place them at the top or bottom of your deck in any order. Then when attacking, reveal the top card of your deck. You may play up to 1 2-cost character as rested, then return the remaining card to the top or bottom of your deck. So kind of like Ivankov a little bit. At the same time, you can get to filter your draws by looking at the top 3 cards of your deck and then shipping them to the bottom if you don't like them. So utility wise, I think there's a place for Zeph in some blue decks. Would you replace this with X-Drake, for example, the new X-Drake for OPO5? That's a conversation to have, but I think this could be useful in this deck. We gotta wait and see. Next up, we got Duval. I love that Duval is in this deck, and I love that he's masked. So, maybe we'll have a Duval leader and we can have that alternate art of his face. 2 cost 1000 power with counter 1000 with blocker, and on play, look at the top 3 cards from the deck and place them at the top or bottom of the deck in any order. So a good way to kind of filter. People have been kind of hyped on Duval as well, because for Queen players, now you have either like the Piranha on the 1 Don play, but you can also have Duval on your, if you're going second, on your 2 Don play, and then you can kind of filter out the cards. Sure, it's only 3 cards, not 5, but it's still a way to filter out the top few cards of your deck, and then in the later game, it's a cheap blocker that you can play out, and then you can attack. You can filter out and then put something really, really good at the top of your deck, and then attack with Queen, and when you gain 1 life, you can get the card that you want on top of your life. So you can plan triggers that way. So this is a good card for Queen players. Rejoice. And yeah, excited to see it making its way into Queen decks in the future. I hope that this starter deck gives 4 copies of Duval, but seeing as how this is actually quite a decent card, it might be only 2. Alright, last but not least is the 2 event cards of this deck. So it's based on kind of like 2 of Zoro and Sanji's earlier kind of signature moves, starting with Lion Song for Zoro. It's a 2-cost event card with main and counter, vest up to one of your opponent's leaders or cost 4 or lower characters. And the trigger abilities activate this card's main effect. It's great because you can rest leaders, which is great, which is super good. You can, let's say someone's attacking with their character, you counter, you rest the leader. If the leader happens to be like a Eustace kid or something, then your opponent's gonna have a bad day after that. But I think this card is interesting, not as powerful as some of the other event cards from starter decks that we've seen, such as the stuff from Uta's deck, but maybe this could sneak some play. People won't expect it. Well, we gotta wait and see. And then the last event card is Parade Shot. It's a 1-cost event card with counter. Give up to one of your leaders or characters plus 2000 power for this battle. Then reveal the top card of your deck, play up to 1-cost 2 character or 2-cost character, and then place the remaining cards at the top or bottom of your deck. So similar to how Zeph and Ivankov has the ability, you can have this as well. And the fact that those cards that I mentioned, Ivankov, Zeph, and this event card kind of churn out like the 2-cost characters that you can potentially use in conjunction with your leader ability. Maybe that's what the deck's trying to do. You can flood the board with some mini small stuff and then have fodder for your opponent to for your leader to return back to your hand so that you can withstand a really strong attacker. And that's just how the engine works. So there you go, a little breakdown of all the cards coming to ST-12. Whether or not this deck will kind of make waves depends. I think some of the cards, maybe like Mihawk, could be potentially Ivankov, especially Duval for Queen players would be really good, but the leader itself is actually really quite powerful, and I cannot wait to see like people build around Zoro and Sanji as a leader and potentially have a really annoying like withstand continuously attacking deck in the future. The meta game is gonna change once this card drops, so I'll be doing an opening of this starter deck once it's out. I believe it's on the 28th of October, so it should be like next week from the time of this video being released. So once it's out, I'm definitely gonna make an opening just to kind of take a look at the cards and see the exact numbers of the cards, so look out for that. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video breakdown. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.